Good morning, Madison Hills. Couple of confessions right up front. Number one, I'm unsure about the bumper and the graphic. Anybody else? You like it? Yeah? Adorable? Yeah? Look good? Look good? Okay, confession number two. I didn't know that owls were related to wisdom. Did you? Yeah? Okay, show me your hands if you knew owls were related to wisdom. Okay, wow. Okay, and who didn't? Show me your hand if you didn't. Okay, a handful of us. Okay, gotcha. Okay, wow, I didn't know. Yeah, well, anyway, if you like it, great. I was thinking about changing it, but I felt I would give it one flow and see what you thought. So if you like it, we'll run with it. I'm just not too savvy on it. I don't know why. I think I like all these dark kind of colors, you know. I wear a lot of dark and black. I like that. And then just larger sounds. This one's more cheery. I don't know. Maybe I don't like cheery stuff. It's like do-do-do-do-do. You know, I like boom and stuff. So I don't know. We'll run with it, though. We'll run with it. So we're going to start a journey, 4-week journey about wisdom. And I want to kick it off in a special way this morning with a really cool story from 1 Kings. So if you like to follow along, you can go ahead and turn to your Bible there, 1 Kings. If not, we got it on the screen for you, so you'll have the text either way. But 4 weeks, and I think we can wrap this idea of wisdom around your life and my life and the life of Madison Hills Christian Church so well with how wisdom is just sprinkled throughout both the Old and New Testaments. There's a whole book devoted to the concept of wisdom. We know it as Proverbs, and it was written by a guy named Solomon, who was supposedly the wisest man who ever lived. And I think the word wisdom is actually referenced 54 times in this book. And when you read these Proverbs, there's just these really short snippets of just shots of wisdom or discernment or insight. And then you read them, and then you can compare and contrast them with these stories, some in the New Testament, some in the Old Testament, that just flesh out these small, simple statements. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to just start on this journey of these small statements through the book of Proverbs, and then find ourselves stepping into these stories and how these stories, even though they're ancient, make sense to us in a 21st century world. So does that sound good? All right, so Proverbs, I think it starts out, Solomon, son of David, the Proverbs. And again, 54 times the word wisdom is sprinkled throughout that whole text there. But you read in the Proverbs a little bit, and you get into chapter 4, and there's just this great insight. The author says, hey, you got to get wisdom. Like, it's so important. Above all else, you got to search for wisdom. And then he says this advice right here, chapter 4, verse 7. Get wisdom. Like, read that. Is that worded funny to you? Like, get wisdom at the end of that sentence. It just jumps out at me like, da-da-da-da, get wisdom. And I think that's really common in all of your translations. There's only a handful of translations that word this differently. So my question, when you read a statement like that, get wisdom. My question is, how? How? How do you get wisdom? Do you grow up with it? Is it nurtured in your life? Does it just happen one day? One day you're unwise and the next day you're wise? How do you get wisdom? Well, thankfully, there's a story that fleshes this out for us and shows us in real time how one goes about getting wisdom. And it actually comes from the life of Solomon, who was the son of David and Bathsheba. So Solomon is this season of life where he's going to step into this new position, and he's going to assume the role of king. And he's a very young guy, and he steps into this position, and there's all kinds of new responsibilities. And there's new challenges. There's going to be new expectations. And I think right there is where some of you can step into the story. There's some new responsibilities. There's some expectations on your life. And maybe they weren't there previously. So your question is, what am I going to do with this? What am I going to do about this? And that's where Solomon is, stepping into this role as king. So he's in this season, role of king, and he goes to this place and he starts worshiping. And you can read this in your text about how they worship there. It's 1 Kings 3. You can read the first several verses in the story, and there's a little note there about pagan worship and all of this. But anyway, Solomon puts himself in a position of worship, and then he hears from God. Now, I don't know about you, but that's been my experience in the past. Sometimes David Green can just get rolling with life. and life feels like it's rolling. And it's not until something happens that checks me and reminds me, oh, I need God. Sometimes life can be so good that you forget you need him. Sometimes it can be so bad that you don't even think he cares. So when you and I get here, and I hope you know this, I look forward to this every single week. Do you look forward to Sundays? Oh my gosh, come Monday evening, I'm like, come on, come on. I just love getting together with you all, being here. So if it's singing, or if it's praying, or some form of worship that you do, because worship is a lifestyle, something you're doing through the week, when you put yourself in a position of worship, you're putting yourself in a position to actually hear from God. And that's what Solomon is doing. He's in this little season and he's worshiping his God. And you can read what that looks like in your text from an ancient perspective. But he's worshiping God, and the Lord appears to him in a dream. And he says, Solomon, here's a blank check. Ask me for anything you want. And that's our hint, the first hint about how you go about getting wisdom. You ask. So several years ago, I've told you before about my mentor. Just love the guy. He's been on my mind a lot lately. I don't know why, but I was at his house several years ago, like 2 decades ago. At his house, hanging out, and there was this wood piece on his desk, and it was laid over, and I could tell it opens in some way or whatever. And I'm like, hey, so what is this right here? I've seen it the past several weeks I've been here. What is this? And he gets it, he opens it, and I'm like, okay, that's great. Now what is it? And then I felt like an idiot because he puts it on his desk, and then he gets a book, and he puts it on it and opens it. And it's just a book stand. But it was so ornate and so well done. I was like, I love that. That is beautiful. Where can I get one of those? And he takes the book off, lays it on his desk, folds it, and he hands it to me. And he says, here, you can have it. I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you. Thank you so much. And then he says this. He says, David, and he looks at me with those eyes that he had, just a phenomenal guy. And he said, David, if I have anything, and this was a very wealthy, well-studied man. He said, if I have anything that you really want, all you have to do is ask. So over the next few weeks, man, I took him to the cleaners. Oh my gosh. No, I'm just kidding. But I remember that moment. I don't know who I learned this from, and maybe that was the catalyst for something that I carried with me over the years, and I hope I still have, and I hope I never lose. And it's the idea of being coachable or teachable, or always learning from people who are a few steps ahead of you. So in that moment, though, I remember looking back at him and saying, you know what I really want that you have? I want to know what you know. This guy was brilliant and sharp and loved the Lord. And that was what was the precursor for us getting together every Saturday morning and him just teaching me, simply because I asked. So you and I, we get together in a moment like this, and maybe you're at some kind of crossroads, or you're at a season in your life where you've got to make a decision. And it's a big decision. And it relates to your career, or to your family, or maybe it relates to your faith, and you're just unsure of what to do. How do you get wisdom? You ask. We've got this beautiful promise in the New Testament from James 1. James says, hey, if any of you lacks wisdom, all you have to do is ask. And God gives generously, just like my mentor. How do you get wisdom? You ask. So God appears to Solomon in a dream and says, ask me for whatever you want. Blank check. Can you imagine that? This God that we worship, the creator of the universe, comes to you and says, ask me for whatever you want. What do you ask for? So Solomon, being new to this kingship, says, God, I feel like a little child. I'm just a little child, and I don't know how to fulfill or carry out my duties. Do you know that's okay to say? I did some research on this not too long ago because I heard this on a radio program. I was doing a commute and I listened to this particular guy on the radio, and just a funny guy. It was about a 2-hour program, just great. But he would have these call-ins, and apparently 75% of the time this dynamic happens. When a guy is asked a question by another guy and the guy doesn't know the answer, the guy says, well, I'm not sure. 75% of the time, when a guy is asked a question by a gal, if he doesn't know, 75% of the time, he will make something up instead of saying, I don't know. Isn't that crazy? So I put it to use, and I think it's true. I mean, sometimes Michelle asks me a question, and I don't know, but I go off on this tangent, like I'm the scholar in this field or something. I have no idea why we do that. So guys, I want you to know, we've got the smartest man who ever existed, and that title was given to him by God, saying, I don't know. That's okay. It's okay if you don't know. It's okay if you don't know what to do, because you have an opportunity to get wisdom simply by asking. So Solomon says, God, I don't know how to do this. I feel like a little child. I'm inexperienced. I'm new to this position. And some people suggest that Solomon was roughly 20 years old at this time. So maybe it's an age thing too. I don't know what to do. So will you give your servant a wise or discerning heart? Isn't that a neat request? I'm unsure of what my next steps are. I know I'm in this position, but I don't know what to do. Can you give me a discerning heart? Now, when you read the text, we don't have it on the screen, but when you read the text, Solomon says, I want a discerning heart for two reasons. One, I want to be able to govern the people. I want to be able to do this job, and I want to be able to do this job well. And number two, I want to be able to distinguish between right and wrong. That's why I need a discerning heart. Now, I don't want to get into the weeds with this. It's very easy. I like words and I like word studies. So it's easy when you're talking about mission, vision, purpose, all of those things that I just love to geek out on. It's so easy to be so technical that you actually miss what the main thing is. And we never want to miss the main thing. I think that's true for the words discerning and wisdom as well. Some people say these words have a nuance that makes them different. And some people say, no, they're interchangeable. Well, just reading through this story of Solomon, I think there is one particular nuance about them. That if you use them interchangeably, no problem. But I do think that discernment comes under the authority or umbrella of wisdom. Wisdom is a little more encompassing than discernment. So reading through this story, doing word studies, all of this stuff, how we use these two words in the English language, how they're used in the original language, it seems a fair distinction would be discernment is more about what is happening in the moment. What is happening? And wisdom is about what should happen. Discernment, what is really, literally occurring in this moment. And then wisdom lets me know what should happen, as in what I should do based on what is occurring. So, I was a commuting student for a while, going down to Tennessee a couple times a week as a commuting student. I had this class. It was music appreciation. It was a early class in the, it was like a 101 class. And I had a 7:30 class. It was 7:30. I had a 2.5-hour commute from where I was going, and it wasn't possible for me to stay overnight with this. So anytime I had a 7:30 class, especially in the winter months, I would go to the professor before the class, and I'm like, hey, I'm a commuting student. It's a long commute. I haven't had any problems before, any problems yet, but the winter's coming. At that time of the day, the salt trucks aren't out a lot. I can't control traffic, so I'm just giving you a heads up. If I'm late 4, 5, 6 minutes, 10 minutes, or whatever, or if that happens a little consistently during these months, I'm not negligent. I'm not disrespecting you. I'm very sorry. It's just probably traffic or weather. Is that okay? Every professor was like, oh yeah, not a problem. Maybe just shoot me an email letting me know what's going on, if you think there's going to be inclement weather or whatever, if it's going to be a problem. Or as soon as you get here after class, if you were late, just touch base with me. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Except one professor. And he was from music appreciation. And I hope he never sees this video. But anyway, he and I just didn't hit it off. We just didn't work well together. So I go to him and I tell him, I'm like, hey, 7:30 class to go through the whole spiel. And he looks at me and he says, no, I don't think we're going to do that. This is an institution, and we work differently. And I'm like, all right, That's cool. Okay, all good and everything. So we have a couple of weeks go by, and he and I are just butting heads. We probably don't like each other. It's probably one of those dynamics. And you throw a couple of more details into the mix. You've got people like that, right? Or is this just me? Okay, you've got people like that. Okay, good deal. Just making sure it wasn't me, okay? Because I walked away from this thinking I wasn't the problem, but maybe I am. I don't know. But your laughter said, no, he's probably not the problem. So we have this little hiccup and everything. And then it gets a little heated between us. And he tells me, because this particular class, it hadn't been a problem. This particular class, I happened to be late 4 times, back to back to back to back. It had to be this guy. So we get into this email exchange, and it's getting a little rocky, a little rough, a little heated. So he was like, if you're late one more time, you're out of the class. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And this is a 101 class too. Like, we don't even need this. We just do this, for you. It's not even for us. So I'm like, all right, okay, all right. So I'm going to class. I'm driving. I kid you not. It's dark. I probably still have this picture somewhere. I'm driving, and I see blue lights up ahead. I'm like, are you kidding me? I hope somebody's just pulled over. Hope they were speeding or something like that. So get a little farther, and then it's just this big debacle. And I'm like, what? And I'm on my way to his class. So I slow down and I stop, and I'm there for like 30, 45 minutes, and I see the minutes just ticking by. So I take a couple of pictures, and then I take a video, and I'm going to show this. So I get to class, and I miss the class. So I'm like, okay, where's his office? I find his office. I go to his office. I knock on his door. As I'm knocking on his door, I'm pulling my phone. I knock on his door, and I'm pulling my phone out of my back pocket. He opens the door. I guess it had a peephole, and sees me. And it's like, he opens the door, but he sees me doing this. And I'm like, I hope he doesn't think I'm pulling something out. But he takes a step back like this right here. And I'm like, this dude really does think I have something. I'm like, man, it's just a phone. It's just a phone. It's all good. I want to show you a couple of videos. I don't want to see any videos. I'm like, I just want you to see that this happened. I don't know if it's me or you or whatever, but this really happened. And I'm so sorry. And he was like, nope, I don't want to see it. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So I take this deep breath like this right here, and he takes another step back. And he was kind of one of those guys, like on edge, like maybe expecting violence or something like that. And I'm thinking, this guy thinks I'm going to assault him or punch him or something. And I'm like, he's right. No, I'm kidding. I felt that way, but I wasn't about to do anything. I don't know if it was my body language or what, but in the moment, that is what was happening. So in the moment, I start thinking through that as well. This guy thinks I'm going to be violent toward him, and he's a professor. So any indication like this, I'm going to be in more hot water with higher up people. That's what is happening. That's discernment, being aware of what's happening. So I take a step back to diffuse it. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. Because technically, he is right. So wisdom tells me, what should I do? I should leave. So I left. I wrote him an email, and I wrote the academic dean an email explaining the case. And I said, send, and the chips fall wherever they may. Whatever happens, happens. In the moment, what is happening, that's discernment. What you should do about what's happening is wisdom. And that's how you make your decisions. That's what Solomon is doing. In the moment, he's fully aware of everything that's going on. He's discerning. And then he asks God for this discernment so that he knows what he should do. So if you've got a decision you've got to make, well, what's happening? And what should happen. Now, when you read this story, this is just a beautiful moment for me when I read this. I think what you read next really captures the heart of God. I think you can just hear the heart of God in this next few verses. So Solomon asks for this discerning spirit. The text goes on. We come back to the story, and the author tells us that this request, it pleased the Lord. It pleased the Lord. And God actually says to Solomon, Solomon, since you didn't ask for long life or wealth or for the death of your enemies, then I'm going to give you exactly what you asked for. I'm going to give you a discerning heart. Can you hear the heart of God in that? Now, I don't want to read into the text, and I'm not trying to say it says something it doesn't, but when I read that, just as a person reading through the Bible, when I read those words, it's like a piece of me hears God saying, thank you, Solomon. Everybody else asks for a long life and money and for me to do something about their troubles, and sometimes rightfully so, right? Because I'm the ultimate provider. But you're one of the few who said, you know what's most important here? That I understand what to do. That's the most important thing right here. That I understand what to do, and I know you can help me with that. So apart from wealth or long life or anything else, give me wisdom. And that rocks God's world. I love that. That pleases God. So those times that you've stepped up and you've been the bigger person, or you've made a very, very faithful move in something that's hurt, and it's went against your ego, and you've wrestled with it, and you've battled through, but you were able to say, God, whatever your will is, let that be what happens. Or God, give me a shot of wisdom regardless of the trouble that occurs, regardless of whether things change or not. Whatever's happening, maybe it doesn't change, but what I should do with it, give me wisdom to know what to do with it and to do that. You have just honored God so well. This pleases God. So those moves you make, despite the difficulty and trouble, the creator of the universe, you're a beautiful God. He's pleased by that. Oh, I love that story. So if you're reading through this story, you can kind of divide chapter 3 of 1 Kings into two sections. You've got the section where Solomon asks for wisdom. And now Solomon is going to have an opportunity to act with wisdom. So you're reading through the story and something crazy happens. There are these two, I don't know the right modern words that we should use. So I'm just going to speak freely for a second, and I'd ask your permission. Is that okay? Okay. I know we're in the church, and some of you are probably like, yeah, you can speak freely. Preach it, brother. Come on. It's in the Bible, America, and all that. So thank you. So I just want to bring this out. So there's two prostitutes, and they both have a child. And in the middle of the night, one of the children, they die. So they come to Solomon, and they're like, hey, here's what's going on. And one of the children have died, and while I was asleep, this woman came over here and took my child, and she's claiming it to be her own, and it's actually my child. And Solomon's sitting there listening to this. And you hear that story, you can read this in 1 Kings. So you're listening through this, and you get a glimpse into Solomon's heart and mind with this too. And he's hearing all of these details. And I think, again, this is another place where you and I can step into the story. Solomon's hearing all of this. And you've got some stuff going on in your life, and you're hearing all of the details. And you're hearing this side, and this side. And you're hearing this point, and this point. And someone's saying this, and it makes sense, and it adds up. And then someone says this, and it makes sense, and it adds up. But they don't add up together. And you're like, how do I navigate this? And Solomon actually says, this one says this, and this one says that. I think it's verse 21. You're both saying two different things. What do I do? Now, in any given situation, a group, you can take a family, you can take a sports team, you can take a board of elders, you could take a church, and you can divide them into two groups. Now, the groups won't always be even, if you will. They won't always be evenly divided, like 50-50 or whatever, but they can always be compartmentalized into two groups. And if we took a poll, and I want to do it now too. It's a low-key poll. It doesn't reveal anything horrible about you or anything like that. But another show of hands, kind of like who knew the owls were related to wisdom kind of thing, okay? Just lighthearted. But you can divide the groups into quick talkers and slow talkers. And when I say quick talker, I'm saying quick talker instead of fast talker. Because fast implies pace. And I'm not talking about pace. I'm talking about impulse. You've got quick talkers and slow talkers. And the quick talkers are very quick with an opinion or a perspective. And that's not always wrong. It's just that they're very quick with an opinion or a perspective. And slow talkers like to assess usually. And sometimes that can lead to a slowing down of making a decision, but nonetheless, they're hesitant to speak up. Sometimes they're embarrassed or timid, or sometimes they just like to hear all of the different views before they give their input. But just out of curiosity, you can speak for like you here or you and your family or whatever. And sometimes these things weave in and out depending on the group you're in or the context or whatever. But just out of curiosity, if we could divide us into two groups, who would be a quick talker? Okay. Who would be a slow talker? Okay, I got you. I think if I were to lean one way, it might be the slow. So I'm hearing Solomon, I'm reading through this, and Solomon's like back and forth. This is being said, and this is being said, and it doesn't add up, so what? Now, if you're a quick talker and you read this, you might have a very quick solution. And here's the risk with quick talkers. The risk with quick talkers is that they forget, especially if you're in the church, they forget that the qualities and characteristics of godly wisdom are articulated in a way that shows we don't share the overarching values of the world. You think of James 3:17. Wisdom that is from above, or wisdom that is from of God, is first of all pure. And then it loves peace. And then all those other things, like it's considerate and full of mercy. Quick talkers. Do those characteristics hit you? Do they make sense to you? Are they part of your decision-making process? I hope so, because they're part of wisdom, especially wisdom not from the world, but from above. Slow talkers. The risk of a slow talker is simply this. You hear all of the information and you like to assess. And you assess so much that you don't make a decision. You're always in assessment mode. So James again, and James talks a lot about talking. And James talks a lot about wisdom and bringing those two together. So back to that James 1 verse. If any of you lacks wisdom, ask God, who gives generously without finding fault with anyone, just gives wisdom so generously. But then he qualifies it and he says this. And if you ask for wisdom and it's given, don't doubt. Because if you doubt, and I really don't think James is throwing shade here, I think he's identifying or pointing out reality. If you doubt, then that person is double-minded and unstable in their ways. Again, I don't think that's throwing shade. I think he's defining reality. You ask for wisdom. God gives wisdom, but you doubt. So what happens? You become unstable and double-minded because you're going back and forth. And at the essence, that's what the word doubt means, to go back and forth. Back and forth. So you're constantly in this mode of assessing, what should I do when the actual wisdom has been given to you, but for some reason, and this is why I'm preaching on this, because I think that's where I land a lot of times. The wisdom comes, but I don't like that wisdom. Or that wisdom's hard. Or that wisdom's going to put me in a very uncomfortable spot. Or that wisdom's going to make me feel embarrassed. Or I just don't want to do that wisdom. So I start reassessing and I'm doubting. So Solomon is watching this at play. Solomon takes it all in and then he starts to speak up and he says, okay, and this is just brilliant. This is thinking on a totally on another level. This is from God. So Solomon says, all right, bring me a sword. So they bring him a sword. He was like, all right, now cut the kid in half. Give half to this mother, give half to this mother. Problem solved. So the mother, the real mother, speaks up and says, no. Give the child to her. It's okay. And then Solomon says, that's the mother. Forcing this truth out. Is that amazing? That's wisdom from above. And it's that same kind of discernment and wisdom that James tells us is available to you and to me. And how do you go about getting that wisdom? You ask. And then when you get it, you act. So I'm curious, and you don't have to raise your hand on this one. Where are you with this? Are you in the asking phase? Or is it time for you to act? So the people look at this ruling and they're like, oh, wow. There's no doubt, and this is how the story ends, there's no doubt this guy is filled with wisdom from God. And they accepted him as their king. That's awesome. So this is the art of wisdom. This is how you put it into place. You ask and then you act. So we're going to go on a journey, and I think the next 3 weeks we can really identify what wisdom should look like in your life. We're going to cover 3 different topics, and I think it's going to be a beautiful journey of learning and development and an opportunity to demonstrate humility and really to put God first in your life. So you ready for it? Sound good? You want to go ahead and do week 2 now? All right. God, thank you so much for the way you love us and for always being ready to give us exactly what we need. And right now, Father, I ask on behalf of myself and Madison Hills Christian Church, Father, give us wisdom. If any of us is lacking right now, and we have a decision we need to make, and we're just unsure, and we're entering that mode of going back and forth and doubting, will you give us a shot of wisdom from above so that we know what is happening and what should happen, so that when we leave this building, we put wisdom into practice. God, and we pray that that honors you, and it shows that we are aligned with you in your ways, and not always trying to make you fit into our ways and align you with us. Again, you're good. We know that because of Jesus and your word, so we pray and praise you in his name. Amen.